What's up, everybody? After the legacy series that we just did on parenting, a number of questions came in that we wanted to take more time with, that this series just didn't permit us to get into during each of the three sermons. And so over the next couple of weeks, Bill and I and some others are going to try to work through some of these questions. And so we just want to welcome you in on that.
Just a couple questions. The first one that we were asked, or one of the first ones we were asked, was about teaching your children about giving and tithing, and how early is too early, and what does that look like, and biblically, but even for your family. And so I know for us that we teach, and I know we've talked a little bit, that we teach our children to give off the top and to save a little bit and to spend. And there's several resources out there through different organizations. I know that I think Larry Burkett's old ministry had a little piggy bank, and you had the giving and the saving and the spending. And that's just a model we've had. Whether it's if they get $10, we'll just teach kind of $1 is a tithe, and that's the Old Testament model, and that's a good starting place. And so we've done that with our kids if they've done it. In addition to the question was, what about with gift cards and things like that? And what are your thoughts?
Basically what we do, and our kids are little, so we're just kind of getting started at this, but we try to create in them an attitude of generosity. So if they get something, we try to encourage them to think of how they can also be generous. We also do the save some, share some, spend some, same sort of thing. But just trying to create a culture of generosity is the big thing for us.
Yeah, and one of the things we've done with our kids are a little older, is that they'll do work for people, and my wife is really good about this, and she'll say, hey, if you're going to go do this, maybe you would just do it for free this time. And that's we're not worried about the money. I mean, certainly money is a piece, but like William said, generosity is the piece we're really looking for. And so generosity might just be giving your time and your gifts to serve someone else. And so that's the piece we want to develop in their hearts. And I think the biggest thing also is that they see that you are generous, and they see that you are cheerful and giving, and not holding on too tight. And so they're going to catch on to that and be excited as you present opportunities to do that. So it's a good question, and I think it's an important piece of discipleship as a kid.
Something else my wife does a great job of is very similar to what Sarah does, and encourage them to give something for free. But Victoria will be really offensive to, hey, let's bake something for the neighbors, or let's do this, and kind of take it over there together. And then they get to have that win together. They get to celebrate the joy of giving, and it becomes more attractive.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Good question.
So a lot of the sermon series had to do with parenting and parenting kids from a Christian perspective. What would you say to the kid who's grown up in an unbelieving household, or whose parents aren't Christians?
Right. And I think this is something we see pretty commonly at our church, with whether through the ministry of Young Life, and a kid comes to faith and then they end up coming to church. And so, and it briefly dealt with it in the last week. And I'd say the number one thing that especially, this is more teenager probably too, because you're talking 7-year-olds are coming to church on their own. But the biggest thing would be that they would honor their parents, and that they would not look down on their parents because their parents don't believe, or maybe even their parents are giving them a hard time, that they would be honoring in the way they speak. Because I think there's a tendency to get frustrated and, well, you just don't know, and this is valuable to me, and all these things, or even like they're so much smarter because they've come to faith, which is the exact opposite. So the honoring piece is just huge for them to see that they're going to treat them with respect, that they're going to be a blessing in their home, that they are really truly following Christ. But the reality is this: the gospel, Jesus teaches that sometimes He is going to come to divide families, and you see this in the book of Acts. You see when the early church, when these people are coming to faith, and so they're leaving Judaism and they're coming to becoming followers, and that was huge as a splitting piece in a family in that culture. You see that a little bit now, maybe not as divisive, but so it's not unusual. It's not something that Jesus didn't foresee. But even as Jesus lives with two sinful parents and sinful siblings, even at the end, He's honoring His mom and His dad, and I think that would be my encouragement to that 16-year-old who has come to faith and really wants to see his parents. That he will more likely win his parents by his gentleness and his humility and his respect than he will by just putting a track under their bed, or getting them to come to church at some point.
Right. What's coming to mind for me is Peter's instruction to wives, but I think kids can take the same advice. He says, "Wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives when they see your respectful and pure conduct." And I think a high schooler doesn't need to underestimate the impact they can have in their home, because when they're loving Christ and they're loving the people around them, it can be pretty profound. I actually saw that this past weekend. A guy who's really close to me who came to Christ when he was in 10th grade, and parents may have had a nominal relationship with Christ at best, probably not. But the way that he lived his life over the next 6 years had such a profound impact on his family that this past Friday night at the rehearsal dinner, his dad got up and toasted him, citing the Bible, moved to tears because of the Spirit's work in his own life that really began with this high schooler who had become a Christian. So it's pretty powerful, the impact that a high schooler could have when he honors his mom and dad.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, Fowler, I've got young kids. Is it okay for me to parent them by saying, "Because I said so"? And if not, why not?
Yeah. Interesting when I read this question, because the man in me wants to say absolutely. Just because I'm in charge, right? But I don't think, and there's probably certainly a time when it's like, it's in a quick moment, something needs to be done. But I would say that if a child is asking a why question, it is an opportunity to equip that child and explain why. It's, don't watch this movie. Why? Because I said so. Well, that doesn't actually give them anything. That doesn't help them to understand why we do what we do. And if you're doing this with teenagers, then it's probably even more so an issue. Maybe when they're young kids and you say, "Don't put your finger in the socket," well, But the goal is to equip and disciple and to raise up and to train. And if they give you the opportunity to do it, I think it's wise to do it. Because if it's always don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and they don't have any explanation why. Ephesians 6:4, it says, "Fathers, don't exasperate your children." I think that is exasperate. It is to me. I mean, it would be if you just told me, "Don't do this," and you don't tell me why, and there's no explanation. And children are people. It's just little us's. And so if we're truly going to help them see a Christian worldview and understand what it is to follow Christ, I have no problem with saying, if they say, "Well, Dad, why?" then say, "You know what? This is why. This is what." And if there's not some reason. Sometimes there's going to be maybe it's a gut feeling. Maybe it's I don't have a good feeling about this. I think you could be honest with that, but it shows that you care and you're trying to reach their heart and not just. It's not behavior management. That's the key. Right. We're trying to remind ourselves. Behavior management's easy and it makes us look good, but it's not the goal. Right. And so that's what I would say. I would say try to come up with an explanation and tie it back to truth and in a Christian worldview.
I think it's also a good way to teach them that God's commands are an expression of His kindness. That Absolutely. It's actually for our good. And so if we can show them that our commands are for their good, it's going to help them learn something about God's commands as well.
And constantly in the Scripture, you see commands with explanations, whether it's honor your father and mother.
Right.
Why?
So that may go well with you.
May well within the land. This is the first commandment with a promise. I mean, there's always there's not always, but most of the time there's an explanation.
Right.
That why God has this for you. This is the way of God, your sanctification. You abstain. Why is that? It's rooted in who you are now. It's not rooted in this is the old, this is the new. There's always this. God gives us the reason as our Father, and He wants us to understand His heart, and I think that's important. So I would try in a gentle way and not in an angry way.
As often as you have opportunity.
Yes, as often explained. So, all right. Well, I hope you enjoyed the first of these videos. Next time we're going to come back and get a couple questions about one, gender roles. It's a hot topic, obviously, in the church, and how do you start thinking about that even when kids are young, and even one about rebellious teenagers and some questions about that and how to handle those. And we're going to bring in one of our elders who has older kids, because my oldest is 16 and your oldest is 5, so we're not experts on that, but he will be. So we'll do with that next time. I appreciate you listening, and we'll talk to you soon.